esteemed panelists. We really appreciate you sharing your thoughts with us. We're going to transition again to the last portion, which is the audience question and answer with both of our candidates who are seeking the DFL endorsement to run against Eric Paulson. So I would invite Adam Jennings and Dean Phillips on the stage. They'll each have 2 minutes to give brief remarks because we are running behind schedule. Thank you. And then Shruti and I will be wandering around with hopefully 2 working microphones. I'll leave one up here for you all to share. And then at least one other we know we'll have in the audience, and we'll try and see if another one will work so that you can answer questions. But just so everyone knows, I just picked alphabetically because it made it easier. So we're going to start with Adam Jennings' remarks, and then after your 2 minutes, we'll have remarks from Dean Phillips, and then we'll turn it over to audience questions. So if you would like to ask a question, Shruti and I will be walking around, and we will just wave at us, and we'll come over if we can. And we're going to first prioritize our students who are here who would like to ask questions. Okay. Thank you.
I was all ready for rock, paper, scissors, but yeah. Wow, tough act to follow. If we could get another round of applause, actually, for the high schoolers that have come out. And one thing that I want to point out that's extremely important, Ian had talked about how we welcomed him and we were giving him this space. And I would actually contend the beautiful thing that we are seeing from these students right now is that they're taking it. We're not giving it to them. They are providing true leadership all across this country, and it is a beautiful thing to see. Now, I'm here today. This is a picture of my daughter, Dorothy. She is 5 years old, and she started kindergarten this year. She came out this fall, and she told my wife, Mommy, don't worry, because I have the bestest hiding place in the classroom in the event that a bad man comes into the school. This is my daughter. She's 5 years old. This is completely unacceptable. This is not the kind of thing that we need to have in elementary schools. And I don't know if this camera back here is a Republican tracker or not. But Eric Paulson, what are you going to do to protect my daughter? He's not. We need to pass that along to him, though, because he can respond to us via email and chalk this up as a town hall for him. So I just, how am I doing on time?
You have 40 seconds.
40 seconds. The one thing I just want to say real quickly is I've had some experience with weapons. I spent 8 years in the Minnesota Army National Guard. I fired the M4, the M9, the M203, the M249, the SAW. But the weapon that was issued to me while I was deployed was an M16. Standing orders were, it couldn't be more than an arm's length away from you the entire time you were in country. These are weapons of war. The courts are upholding that they are weapons of war. We need to ban them. We need to get them out of our system, and I'm at time. So thank you very much.
Hello, everybody. I want to thank each and every single one of you here, particularly the students and our organizers. And yes, Adam, that is a Republican tracker. And I'm glad you're here, because I hope you will send this tape to Eric Paulson and to every single member of Congress who lacks courage to do what they're supposed to do. Enough. That's why we're here. I've lived in Minnesota my entire life. I grew up in the 3rd District. I've lived in the 3rd District for many years. And this is a very memorable day, actually, because that cardboard cutout of Eric Paulson is the very closest I've ever come to seeing the man. You know, thoughts and prayers do not save lives. Action saves lives, everybody. In 1934, when we had a massive crime wave because of prohibition, we passed the National Firearms Act in 1934. 1968, after the assassinations of John Kennedy, Bobby Kennedy, Martin Luther King, and many others, we again took sensible action. 50 years later, everybody, 50 years later, we have a national crisis, and there is no action in Washington. And if Congress will not make changes to save our kids' lives, I will support you in changing Congress, everybody. I promise. We need universal background checks, everybody. We need an assault weapons ban. We need We need mental health professionals in every single school in this country. We need anti-bullying programs in every single school in this country. Congress finally allowed the CDC to study this issue, but they did not mandate it, and they did not provide one penny, of which I see sitting on the floor right here, to provide funding to do so. And last but not least, everybody, if we do not change campaign financing in this country, nothing is going to change. And if you have 2 minutes tonight, Google the name Mark Dan, the former AG in Ohio. He wrote an op-ed piece in the Cleveland newspaper that expresses how the gun lobby owned him. If you want to see what needs to change, read that piece, everybody. Mark Dan. We are going to make changes, and it's coming. Thank you.
Does mine work? Good, we have 2 working microphones in the audience. And Shruti, do we need another one? Oh, okay. So, are there students here who would like to ask a question? Can you, Shruti, go over on that side, and I'll try. Anybody over here? Okay. So while Shruti walks over here, I'm closer to some of our panelists here.
Thank you guys, first of all, for being here and taking some questions from us. So my question is that obviously voter participation is very important to amplifying the voices of young people like myself who are kind of taking the leadership of this movement. Oh, is it not on?
It's not on.
How about now?
No, it's not.
Oh, hey! Okay, so I'm going to quickly do that again. Voter participation is very important to amplifying the voices of young people who are helping to lead this movement. How do you plan on breaking down some historic barriers of young voter participation in this country and encouraging young people to get out to vote? Thank you very much.
And how much time do you think? Okay.
It's a great question, and it actually comes up a lot because it's not only our young voters, it's our minority communities as well, and we need to make an active effort to reach out to them and know that they are part of this process. Now, if there was something good that came out of Parkland, it's the fact that there's this wave. I mean, we expected 8,000 people to come to the March for Our Lives event at the state capitol, and we had 18,000 people show up. So as representatives, we need to be present, and we need to ensure that we're part of that when these things happen. And we need to continue to have town halls and continue to engage and continue to make sure that our young people are coming out. And some of that is just how we use our technology too. So much of what we're doing right now is commercials, and kids they're not watching commercials. So we need to utilize different avenues, different channels to make sure that we're reaching people adequately using the correct technology. And I think that's where I'm at. So thank you. Good question.
So I'm a father of 2 teenage daughters, and usually when I ask them to do something, they do just the opposite. So I'm going to turn this back on you. Every one of you who attend high school in this room are the most powerful in this room right now to affect the question that you just posed. Please ask your friends, whether you're 18 or not, 17-year-olds, going to be 18 to vote, pre-register. Encourage your friends, encourage the people who are going to be off in college when November comes around to vote absentee. And I ask you to do that, because that's how we're going to affect change. There are a lot of 18-year-olds who are going to be voting for the first time in this district and around the country, everybody. That's exciting. And I've got an extraordinary campaign team of 10 people, 3 or 4 of whom spend every day doing what you're talking about. Engaging people, energizing people, educating people about how we can participate. And if this is any evidence of what's coming, everybody, we're in good position, let me tell you. So, and lastly, I'm a candidate who, of course, I would love to earn your support, especially you students. But I'm here to actually support you. And I ask that you tell Adam and me, I see Kelly Morrison in the room, Patty Acomb in the room, Heather Adelson in the room, Austin, who just ran for and just won Senate at the University of Minnesota in the room. Tell your electeds and those running for office, tell them, and let us know how we can support your effort, because you are the ones affecting change, everybody. Adults haven't done it. And it's up to you, and that is what makes me so optimistic and so hopeful about what's going to transpire in November. So thank you. Let's get it done.
Hi, my name is Effie Cosette's sister, and I'm 9 years old. And I'm here because there have been too many school shootings, and I would like that to stop. Can you help me keep my school safe?
I didn't hear your name, honey. What's your name? Effie. So Effie asked how we're going to keep you safe, and that's why we're all here. None of you, nobody should live in fear. And in the United States of America, we take action to protect our own. And we're spending a whole lot of time and resources, everybody, trying to protect ourselves from threats that, in my estimation, are not nearly as acute and existential as the one that you're talking about right now. So what we're going to do, we're going to do a bunch of things. Everything that Adam believes in, everything that I believe in, everything that everybody in this room believes in, and frankly, everything that everybody in the 3rd District believes in, we're going to get done, which is protecting people's lives. I promise you, I will not rest, Adam will not rest, there's not anybody in this room that will rest until we know you are safe. And you are safe right now, let me assure you. We're taking steps every single day to make it better. And that means action. And I'm so grateful that you came here today, because there are some students a little bit older than you, but I hope you're going to be part of them someday really, really soon. So thank you very, very much.
Let me just say thank you for asking the question. It takes a lot of courage to come up and do that. And all of those people clapping right now, they're with you. I'm with you. Dean's with you. We are all with you on this. And what we are going to do is we are going to flip this district. We're going to flip this district. We're going to make Eric Paulson go find a new job. And then we're going to pass some laws that make sense in this country. And we are going to take it to the NRA. We're going to make sure we don't, we're going to outlaw the assault weapons, the bump stocks, the silencers. But more importantly, the one thing that I want to throw out, because that I don't think we talk enough about, is I actually want to ban the replacement parts on AR-15s. Let's turn AR-15s into paperweights over time. Let's have a buyback program here federally. I want to buy back the weapons, melt them down, and turn them into thumbtacks. Let's sell them and try and take care of the deficit the Republicans just gave to us. So I'm sorry, I'm getting a little off deficits, all kinds of things. But I can assure you that we have your best interests at heart, and I will do absolutely everything to make sure that you, these kids, my children, are safe in schools.
How will you work with the Republicans to get gun legislation passed?
It's a great question, because what's interesting is that we need a bipartisan solution, and I like the concept of a bipartisan solution, but it assumes that everybody's at the table during the negotiation. And the Republicans have made this a partisan issue. The way we win on something like this is that we take control. We take control, and then we pass sensible legislation, and we push it through, because that's, if there's one thing that Democrats haven't been doing, we have not been utilizing the strength that we have when we're in power. And we need to be significantly more full-throated about what it is we're going to do. And we're going to go in, and we're not going to nibble around the edges. It's not going to be bump stocks, so Paul Ryan can feel better about being a congressman. It's going to be all of it. It's going to be. Let's ban assault weapons. It makes sense. Let's get rid of silencers. Let's get rid of bump stocks. Let's universal background checks. No fly, no buy. Let's pass single-payer universal health care so everyone can have mental health care. It's just, We have to operate from a position of strength when we are in power. Our first job is to make sure that we're boxing Donald Trump in after we flip the entire House in 2018. And then in 2020, let's get him out of there and let's take control and get some things done.
So the question is, how would I work with Republicans to effect the change that we all desire? All of you know we have a constitution that designed a system of governance that is intended to make change difficult. And boy, does it work. It works very effectively. That means it's a responsibility to find ways to collaborate. And I'll tell you, one of the great epiphanies of my campaign so far is recognizing that as I meet with Republicans and independents and Democrats and libertarians and everybody across the board in this district, we mostly agree on the outcomes, everybody. We mostly agree on the outcomes. Cleaner air, cleaner water, better public schools, safe streets, a safe country, better health care, higher quality at a lower cost, and gun violence. So I'm going to ask you a couple of things, please. Let's start the conversation by talking about gun violence prevention. If you want to end a conversation with the Republicans that we do have to work with if we want to affect change, use the word control. It ends the conversation. The outcome is gun violence prevention, and more comprehensively, violence prevention. And the way to do so, because residents of the 3rd District and around this country, in fact 90% almost of this entire country, Republicans and Democrats, want universal background checks. The reason it doesn't happen is the gun lobby, everybody, and the lobbyists generally. The money in politics is what prevents it from happening. There are thoughtful Republicans. Many of them live in this district. They want their kids safe in school just like I do and just like you do. So we have to agree on the outcomes and then work our way backwards, and we can do it. And a lot of what some Republican thinking is proposing is right. We need better mental health care in schools and around this country. It transcends this issue. We need anti-bullying programs. There are human issues. And we need to complement that with what I know everybody in this room wants to see too, which is less access to those weapons of war. And we can do it, but we need to send people to Congress from both sides of the aisle who are willing to go and get the work done for people instead of party.
So my question is for both of you. You both been talking about the universal background checks, been going on how we need to improve that status here in North America and how we should implement this more. But how are you going to prevent the loopholes into this? Because private arms dealers and sellers do not have to have universal background checks. And businesses that sell firearms that are also private and corporations don't have to have universal background checks. So how will you be preventing this here in Minnesota?
And you're right, and that's why the notion is universal background checks. That means there are no loopholes anymore. That's exactly, I think, what we're both talking about. Which, in fact, some of you might know this. In the state of Minnesota, if you're 14 years old and you live outside of an urban area, outside of a municipality, you can acquire a long gun in a private transaction, no questions asked. 14 years old. You can't drive till you're 16, you can't vote till you're 18, and you can't have a beer until you're 21, but you can buy a shotgun when you're 14. It's, in my estimation as a parent, I don't like that. And universal background checks are designed to close all the loopholes and ensure that if you wish to acquire a weapon in this country, a firearm, that you're subject to a very general background check. But we have to complement that with a system that identifies people that should be subject to those checks and precluded from acquiring a firearm. This is a systematic issue, and we do need to collaborate with everybody in this country to ensure it works. You know, Fix NICS is another example, that relies on the data that is provided to the system. But that's what universal background checks means, is that we do close those loopholes and ensure that anybody who acquires a weapon is subject to at least a check.
And I would second all of those sentiments completely, and we need to have additional legislation too around the gun shows themselves. I don't think those make sense. That's where a lot of those transactions take place. Let's just make sure that you have licensed dealers that can sell these, and that's where all the transactions happen. But I do want to circle back around real quickly to what we just talked about. You know, taking the outcome. We all want the same outcomes, right? It's harder than that, because the Republicans, when you take your first step backwards, a lot of them want to start arming our teachers. They want to make sure that everybody's got a sidearm. Their solution to decreasing gun violence in this country is to make sure that everybody has a gun. So this is one reason we have to have a goal in mind, and we have to push back and make sure that we fight for the things that we believe in. There was something else I was going to say, and I'm blanking right now. But I've got a minute, so I can wait you out. It'll come back to me, but I think it's extremely important for us to recognize that fact. This is what it was. I can prove to you why it's difficult to make this a bipartisan situation. The Republicans have the House, they have the Senate, and they have the presidency. Where's the legislation on mental health care right now? Where's any legislation at all? Congress started to talk about it, and then what happened was it transferred over to the Justice Department because apparently our AG was looking at this back in December, even though they never said anything about it. So I think it's a bit of a red herring, and I think we need to call them on it. And it's important to fight for the things that we believe in and bring them to the forefront. Thanks.
Firstly, I'd like to thank both of you for being here when our congressman unfortunately couldn't make it due to a hockey game. So my question
Jerk. And a coward, just if you're getting that.
With the NRA using fear tactics and notions like Democrats trying to take away all guns, using that to really drive gun sales, how do you plan on getting around that fear-related message and really trying to connect with voters?
That's a great question. The other thing that I want to point out right now, that the only person in this audience that has said anything that's near belligerent is me. So that's a poor excuse as well, Eric. Everyone here has been extremely respectful. So what we distinguish between here is we basically, there are lots of gun enthusiasts, but there are a lot of hunters. I know a lot of hunters, and they understand this. If you're going to go out and you're going to hunt a deer, you're not using an AR-15. Right? You're using something that's sensible. If you've got a shotgun, it allows you 5 shells if you're hunting for something big. If you're out going for pheasants, it allows you 3. So this is about making sure that we're addressing the hunting community and making sure that, hey, we're not interested in coming after your guns. There are a lot of long, deep traditions in this country within families who hunt and respect the animals, and it's okay. That the Second Amendment protects that. It's redefining what military weapons are in this country. My personal belief is, if you want to fire something like an AR-15 and M16, go join the military. Otherwise, you don't get one. But that's what this is about. And the great thing, this gives me hope, is the courts are already picking it up. Massachusetts just passed something, just ruled on this last Friday, where they indicated that AR-15s and assault weapons are not protected by the Second Amendment because they are designed to kill people. So that's where we win. It's about having sensible conversations with people out there that hunt versus people who are scared. Thank you.
Well, in my estimation, the two biggest drivers, emotional drivers of human activity, are hope and fear. And the NRA has used fear exceedingly well to divide this country. In fact, I would argue that we have foreign operatives that have recognized how successful their tactics are and are doing the same thing to try to divide this country. I'm running for office because I believe hope will transcend fear, everybody. I believe hope will transcend fear, and this is where it begins. Who is stronger, this room or the NRA? This room is stronger than the NRA. And I'm disappointed that this room isn't full today, to be honest with you. If we did this a year ago, there'd be 15 people here. Today there are 250 people here. Next time we show up, I want 500 people here. That's how we change it. That's how we change this country. That's what Donald Trump gave us a gift. He gave us the most extraordinary gift of my lifetime. He gave us the most extraordinary gift of our lifetime. Participation. I stood up because I've had enough. Adam stood up because he had enough. Millions of people like you are standing up because they've had enough. Thousands of candidates around this country standing up because they've had enough. And people will join the principled bandwagon if we give them a chance and if we extend the invitation. So let's do the human thing and extend invitations to thoughtful people, regardless of their political parties. Hope. Everybody, hope. And it begins right here. That's how we're going to change this culture. And it begins with all the students who are doing it for us. So thank you, thank you, thank you.
Hi. One question I have is looking at the demilitarization of our nation, looking beyond just the bounds of gun violence in our schools and looking at our police force and the use of ICE and all these military tactics to try and enforce justice.
And was there a question? I missed the question.
Okay, yeah. So I guess my question is, how do you guys feel about that, and what do you guys want to do about demilitarization if you're in support of that?
So, we are the land of the free. This is the United States of America. And the great challenge we will always face is the intersection between safety and freedom. And I do not want to live in a militarized country. I want my kids to be safe in school, but I do not want them to have to pass through rifles and long guns and metal detectors and live in a society that requires that. And that's why I believe that there's good thinking all across the spectrum right now and what we have to do. Some of it we've discussed today, some of it we haven't. But it does begin with a cultural shift. And it does begin with hope and expectations of how we behave as a people and as a nation, internally. None of us in this room can go to Congress and wave a magic wand and address this issue alone. Not one of us. The President of the United States of America cannot do it, and thank goodness he cannot. It does, everybody. It begins with us. You are more powerful collectively than the United States Congress. That is a truth. And you personally are, because you're starting this conversation. I do not want to see a further move to the right and thinking that by arming everybody and arming schools, although I do believe parents and children would feel safer if they knew there was somebody at a school who is trained in defense and to protect the school. I do believe that. How many teachers are in this audience today? Okay, keep your hands up. How many of you believe that we would be safer if you had a handgun on you? Not a one. Right? Right. So, none of us want that. But it is our job to spread the word, everybody. Thank goodness we live here in the 3rd District. Thank goodness we live in Minnesota with wonderful blessings. Let's use them, everybody. Let's use them and spread the word nationally, beginning with sending one of us to Congress and starting the change.
Good to see you again. You're my NDA question in Chaska. I echo a lot of what Dean's saying, but again, this is one of those things where it's tricky. I mean, it is tricky. The minute we start the conversation, because I look at going to Congress as starting a new job. It's like anything else I've ever done. You know, you don't know exactly what you're getting into. You don't know the personalities that you're working with, and team dynamics have a lot to do with it. When you sit down at the table, you're going to have to negotiate. But if you're going to negotiate, you're going to negotiate effectively, you come in with goals and you say, this is what I want. And that's where you start from. And that's how we have to approach this issue, because it's been far, far, far too long since we've done anything about it. So specifically with regards to militarization, we shouldn't do it. Obama had a program that he had put in place that prevented the sale of armaments to local police departments. And I think we need to re-implement that, because Trump signed an executive order taking that away. And it makes absolutely no sense. A police department does not need a bayonet. There are bayonet sales out there. They're basically the personnel armored carriers are being sold to police departments. That needs to end. And sitting in Congress, it's one of those things, we can pass a law that makes that illegal so that an executive order couldn't override it. And that's what we need to do when we go up there. So, thanks.
Okay, thank you both. I just want to quickly say we are obviously running over time, and I know some people have to go, so thank you all. We are going to keep going with a few more questions, though. Hopefully our candidates are willing to stay for a couple more questions. I know we have a hockey game to get to. Actually, I do have a hockey game. I have frozen 4 tickets for tonight. So funny you say that. So we're going to have one question here, and then 2 questions from students over there, and then I think we'll have to wrap up just due to time.
He's saying. Bad joke, apparently.
Hi, my name is Amy. I'm a public school teacher in this district. I do not want anyone armed in my building, and I do not want a gun. I stand up in front of a class of all children of color, and as a white woman standing in front of them, I do not want a gun, nor do I want anyone armed in my building. What I do need and want is access to quality mental health care for my students. It is their birthright and they are not receiving it. And I want to know, if you are elected, how are you going to help me get my students the quality, dependable mental health care that they deserve?
It's a great question. Public education is one of the major platforms in my candidacy right now. The first thing that we do, because I've talked to a number of school board members all across the district, a number of superintendents. In Congress, we need to fully fund the special education mandate, which was passed in 1972. That opens up a floodgate of funds for school districts, millions and millions of dollars. And that puts schools in a better position to address that. But I was amazed that there actually weren't specific dollars allocated for this at the federal level, and we need to have that conversation as well. But in addition to that, and I know I said this before, if we were to pass single-payer universal health care, Medicare for all, that provides mental health care for everyone, their families included, because a lot of these kids, they're coming to the doorstep because things are happening at home. People are hurting economically, they're self-medicating with drugs, they're descending into mental illness, it's having an impact on the kids. They don't necessarily have enough to eat. So absolutely anything that we can do to get more funding in the schools makes sense. Now, at Parkland, they had armed guards there, and nothing happened. And being in the military, you have to train again and again and again and again and again and again and again, and you still mess it up. And it actually scares me to death that you have an armed guard that's going to fire this thing maybe once a year to qualify, wandering around my kids. I don't want that either. And police departments have fantastic response time in the 3rd district too. I know the police department for our district, their response time is like within a minute if they get a call. So we can still respond to this and make sure that we're allocating the resources effectively. So thanks.
Well, this state and this district have played an important role in at least moving towards what we're talking about. Senator Paul Wellstone argued vehemently for mental health parity in this country. Didn't get to see the day when it was achieved. Congressman Jim Ramstad, who represented this district for many, many years, is the one that carried that ball over the finish line. And that's a legacy of this district. I would argue that we still do not have mental health parity in this country. I think that's fair to say. This issue transcends this conversation about gun violence. This country would be a better one if we valued mental health as much as we did physical health. And I believe that begins in schools. And yes, IDEA, which has been woefully underfunded for 40-some years, and makes all of us in this room, in this district, pay about $150 million a year in unfunded federal mandates. Yes, that should be fulfilled, and we should use those resources to ensure that every school in this country has robust mental health professionals on staff to ensure our children have robust mental health provision. Plain and simple. Teachers in this room, I honor you as much as I do any profession in the entire world, but most of you were not trained to provide the services that these children need. And I recognize that. I would ask every educator in this room, in fact, everybody in this room, if you have ideas on how we can do so. I do believe this can be achieved, and it does require bipartisan work, and I do believe it's actually a unifying issue that this district will support and can. My family just made an investment in a local school that when teachers came to us and begged for resources to ensure that they had somebody who could provide mental health services to their children. The fact that the school district didn't or couldn't was appalling. But it should not be predicated on philanthropy. This should be collective philanthropy from the United States of America, and we should send people to Congress to get it done.
I think
that we need meaningful change now in order to make sure that Parkland is the last school shooting. In the event that Democrats are not able to take back the House, which Republicans would you work with to pass gun violence prevention measures?
As we both referred to, there is a sad dearth of principle right now, I would argue, in the Republican Party. Our Constitution anticipated a president like Donald Trump. It did not anticipate a Congress with so many who lack courage, and that is the root of our problem right now. And I'd like to believe if Donald Trump had run as a Democrat, which he used to be, and had won, that people in this room, myself included, would be standing at the gates of the White House every single day objecting to his management of this country. And I find it appalling that the only time I see any courage demonstrated tends to be by members of Congress who have announced their retirements. That is the problem, everybody. I will work with any member of Congress because Republican members of Congress have children who have died because of gun violence, who have committed suicide because of guns, who have lost friends, family, and loved ones. They are no less or more subject to the same thing that we are here to discuss than any one of us. I will work with anybody. And I'm telling you, everybody, I meet with these people every day. This is not, as this little program says, this is not a Democratic issue. This is not a Republican issue. This is an American issue. We have a responsibility to work with anybody who is willing to protect lives. And damn it, if they refuse, we have to start with state legislatures. And that's why I'm so thrilled to see candidates in this room. We have got to flip our legislature. We have got to keep the governorship blue, and we've got to start from the inside and work our way out.
So the one thing that I'll point out too that I take heart in, Lana said it, Dean said it, we got them by the numbers. We are going to we're going to win by the votes this time. We got it. So we just need to continue. The mindset we need to have is that we're going to win. We win. Talk, everyone in this room, talk to every single person you know and get them out to the polls if they aren't going already. Now, if we don't get it, I will knock on every single representative's door in Congress, and I promise you that. Politicians promise a lot of things, but I do promise you that I will work tirelessly to make sure that we get something done. Now, on our drive over, because this sits home closely with me, I was talking to my wife about this, and it was just like, honey, how was your week? And she's a pediatrician, and she had 2 conversations this week alone with patients of hers who are contemplating suicide. She finds herself in a position where she's having to have a conversation on a very frequent basis about, are the guns secure in your home? Where do you have access to guns? And it's an epidemic in this country, and we need to do absolutely everything when we can to take care of it, and that's why I will work. And like I said, when we're in power, I'm going to take it. We're going to go in and we're going to start putting out some marching orders on things. If we're not in power, you're in a position where you have to work with the other side. You're forced to. But that's the whole point with this, is that we should too often as a party, and I've said this so many times, that when we are in a position of authority, we don't use it effectively. We shrink back before we have even gotten to the negotiation table, and that's important.
So it's obvious that minorities experience the majority of gun violence in America. What are you both, as white males, going to do to make sure that the minorities are protected?
That's a great question. And we have institutional racism in this country, and we need to address it. First and foremost, this is about communities, and this is about dialogue. And we need to provide funding at the congressional level so that police departments can have deliberate conversations with their communities, and you work locally with your expertise. You bring out outside expertise as well to help with this, but create a dialogue so you can start building some bridges in those communities. But there are other pieces of this too, that it's the communities themselves that are locked out and don't have access to equity. They can't build dignity in their own lives in a lot of cases because they don't have the ability to make ends meet because they can't find a job. We need criminal justice reform. And part of that too is just we've got too many people that are locked up in prison right now for innocuous, ridiculous crimes. We need to legalize marijuana. If you're sitting in prison, you should go. If you were ever prosecuted for it, you should take it off your record. It's people get locked out of the system because when they get out of prison, they can't vote, they can't sit on a jury. If they fill out a job application, they have to say whether or not they were a felon. If they're trying to find a place to live, they have to say the same thing. And there's a reason that we have high recidivism rates in this country, and it's because we're creating a pipeline, especially in minority communities, where it's just it's birth to prison. And that's what we address. And it's about equity, it's about criminal justice reform and taking the power away from the prosecutors and putting it back in the judiciary. It's about rewriting our laws. And that's how we're going to get it done.
I've heard countless complaints in the last number of weeks from the communities of color in which I spend a lot of time, wondering why it took a shooting in a predominantly white high school in Florida for this issue to be elevated. And they're darn right, because violence in communities of color has been going on for generations, and we have not paid attention to it as long as it doesn't come into quote unquote the suburban backyard. And that's the truth. And I'm not going to tell you that there's a policy or an idea or anything actionable that can end that tomorrow. There's not. And don't listen to anyone running for office or who serves in office that tells you it is. But the reason that I'm a Democrat is I believe if we take action in the foundational areas of decent humanity, ensuring that people have affordable housing, ensuring that every child in this country is afforded a world-class public education, not just some. Ensuring that their guardians or parents or parent is afforded a livable wage for hard work. Assuring that guardian or parent has a family leave policy if necessary. Ensuring that family or guardian and children have health care provided whenever it is needed, no matter their ability to pay or where they live or what their income is or their condition or their geography. And if we do not attend to these issues, nothing we have talked about today will ever be resolved. That's why we're Democrats, everybody. That's why we are Democrats. And you know the words of Hubert Humphrey. A government should be measured by how it treats those in the dawn of life, in the twilight of life, and in the shadows of life. That's why we're here, that's why change is coming, and that will be how we resolve every issue that is important to every single one of us.
Unfortunately, I know there's lots of questions, but we have to be out of here before 4 because that's when our lease expires. So, thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming out, and let's do this in November.
I have a couple of announcements, though, if you don't mind. I just want to let you know some things that you can do to continue to work on this issue and to stay involved. If you would like to join Moms Demand Action with their lobby day coming up on April 18th, there's flyers out in the lobby, or you can talk to anyone wearing a Moms Demand Action t-shirt. If you'd like to join the West Metro Student Walkout Group, they're doing a letter writing and phone banking campaign. That will be on April 20th at Ridgedale Lunds Byerly's, 4 to 7 p.m. And they have information out in the lobby and a donation box if you'd like to help support the students' work. And then Indivisible's next event is on April 28th from 1 to 4 at Riley Lake Park. It's just a membership gathering, so everyone's invited to that. Thank you again, everyone. If you were a student speaker or other participant in the panel up here, could we get a quick photo before everyone leaves? Thank you, everyone. We appreciate your attendance.